This morning, I gave a talk to a bunch of plumbers about 2024 and what it means for their marketing. Some of these are clients, some of these are not clients, but I'm hoping that everybody found it useful and you might too, so I decided to post the whole thing on my YouTube channel. Anyway, we go over the trends of 2023 that we saw, what we're looking at in 2024 as possibly being the most important things, and we go over budget planning as well as good old-fashioned messaging, because that's ultimately one of the most important things you can do. So I hope you find it useful. If you have any questions, let me know. Be happy to talk. Bye. Here's what we're going to cover. I'm going to start telling you a little bit of context about who I am and the approach that we take to marketing here at Mammoth. We're going to go over some of the trends of 2023 because it was what I would call a somewhat tumultuous year in the world of marketing on the digital front. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about what I think is going to matter a lot in 2024 moving forward. And we're going to actually do some work. I'm going to run you through what you should be doing as far as setting some goals and calculating out some budgets. And then we're going to talk about cost per lead, because this is what will drive your budgeting and your marketing spends and whether or not you're going to reach those goals. And it also is really good for expectations to know, what does the cost per lead cost in your area? So, and then we'll dive a little bit into messaging. I wish I had more time for messaging, but it's such a big topic. And then I'll give you a little bit of some resources, especially if you aren't a client. These are resources that you can use in your business. Clients have access to them. And some of these are things that are clients of Mammoth and clients of another resource. And so there's going to be some of that. And then I'll do a tiny salesy McSales pitch. So I will actively tell you what we do, how we do it, how you can talk to us more about it. And I'll just open it up for general questions after that. And I'm trying to get through this fast enough so that way we actually have time for some questions. I will take probably a break here and there if I remember to, and ask you if you have any questions in between some of the big topics in here. So let's go ahead and get on rolling. First thing, I want you to get these resources. And I'm putting this up right now. Kira, if you could drop that link in the chat. This page that I put together has a internet marketing plan workbook, which has just a lot of things in it that can help you. I just want you to have it. You're not going to be able to fill it out because it's a digital PDF, but it has things like a customer avatar in it. It's got a digital marketing checklist. It's got some website tips, landing page tips, things like that you can kind of go through. But the other thing on this page is going to be a spreadsheet. And I'm going to pull that spreadsheet up later and work you through it a little bit. And that way you have a good tour of it. And you'll have the ability to fiddle with the numbers and sort of work out your budget even after you get off this call. So and it's this same spreadsheet that we're running our clients through this year in order to try and pre-plan budgeting and pre-plan some messaging. So if that's in the chat, we should be good. I see it in the chat. Go ahead and download or go to that page, download the things you need. I will tell you there may be retargeting on that page, and you may start seeing my head pop up in ads all around if you go there. But that just means I'm looping you in. I'm following you. So let's give you a little bit of context. Who am I if you guys don't know who I am? So I started marketing in 2004 as a video producer. I got hired on as an agency or at an agency doing all their production, radio, print, TV. This is 2004. Digital was just like this. And I then went freelance for a while and then landed basically at this agency in 2008. It was not called Mammoth Marketing. It was called Numith Advertising. And we were a local business. We were only handling local clients. And when I bought it, I was already still freelancing, but I was doing work on the side in digital marketing and knew that that's where the world was going. So shepherded the whole agency over. And then my brother called me. My brother was like, hey, I'm tired of working for people. I want to go out on my own. And he did this 4 times. And the last time he kind of had it much better figured out. But that last time his business took off, and it was a plumbing business called Prospector Plumbing. And it is now the dominant plumbing shop in town. And at the same time that I did that, I also hopped into an agency like group, and their big thing was pick a lane. I was like, well, I'm going to pick a lane that is my brother's lane to some degree. And so we've made the leap from as an agency to plumbers primarily. There's some other clients on our client list, but plumbers are who we're marketing to, plumbers are who we're building for. And that has allowed us to focus in. So that's kind of the history there. And now let's talk about our approach. So marketing in general, it can't be one thing. And this, I've done tons of consults with plumbers at this point. And the first mistake that I see in a lot of these consults is relying on one pillar. So they have this stool called marketing, and it's got like two, maybe three legs. Somebody cuts the leg off, and then it's tippy. And then the whole business is at risk from that approach. So I don't like putting people at risk. I want to make sure that people have a very cohesive like marketing world that is built out, and it takes time to build out, and it's something that really gets stronger over time, but it's all these things. It's online, it's offline, it's pre-work, and it's post-work. Like you got to cover the gamut here. And what I found with my brothers and with other clients is as you lift one up, another one lifts, things get cheaper over here because you're doing work over there, and it's all connected. And so they all help build the lead flow, they all help build the business. But in order to really make sure that you have strong legs, because if you have like, 4 weak legs, you're not going to do much, but you got to keep an eye, you have to keep an eye on the trends, and you have to keep an eye on the changes. Not really, let's take trends out, even though I'm going to go over some trends. It's really on human behavior, and it's on platform behavior. Those things are always changing, they're always shifting. This is why marketing is a landscape that is always just moving underneath our feet. And so we're always looking at it and going like, okay, well, this works over here, but doesn't work over here, or this worked back then, but not now. What do we need to be focusing on? And it's hard. The speed of change has sped up dramatically, and 2023 was one of those years where it was just like, wow, lots is happening. And so we'll go over some of that right now. So nothing stays the same. Let's look at what we had in 2023. 2023 was not my favorite year, and it was probably not many plumbing businesses' favorite year because the demand slowed down. So some of this is theory and conjecture, but we had COVID. COVID was an awesome time to be a plumber because everybody had extra money and they had work done that they were putting off, or work done that they normally wouldn't have done. So you got a lot of new installs in, you got like a whole bunch of things patched up, customers were easy, and people took note. This lasted for about 2 years, and people took note, and more plumbing businesses sprang out. And now there's more plumbers than ever, but we're slowing demand back down to what it was in about 2018, 2019, which has changed the landscape in an interesting way. And it's made it harder. So your demand slowed down, competition is still there. And what I think is going to happen is over time, the competition, like the bottom feeder competition, is going to drop out of the market. And then you're going to have, it'll stabilize a little bit, but it's never going to go back to what it was in like 2021, 2022. Those were cool years and good time to build a company, but now you really have to maintain. So, and some of the places that this affected was prices on search, the search terms, because there's more people like bidding on it because they saw the leads slow down. Search got more expensive. Demand gen in general got more expensive, and some platforms completely slowed down. So to give you an idea of that, like I've had calls where people are like, man, I was doing great on Yelp, and Yelp just dropped off the face of the earth for me. Or LSA was doing awesome, and now it isn't. And I don't know why. And my search ads just keep getting more expensive. And a lot of that, I think, is because people are actively going into, like, as their calls slow down, they're trying to get more. So now you have even more competition trying harder. So it's a interesting landscape. It doesn't mean like, oh no, there's no way to make a dent. It just means that the dents take a lot more effort and a lot more structure around them. So along with this, GLSA went from 3 slots on desktop to 2. And honestly, I think this is Google shrinking supply, which with a high demand, so they can raise their prices, because we've seen LSA calls go up, but they're still some of the cheapest you can get if you can get volume. It's really hard to shake the volume in LSA. Reviews became way more important as a ranking factor for your business. So if you aren't like actively trying to get reviews, that needs to become a big priority for your business on your Google business listing. And if you have a separate listing for LSA and a separate listing for your Google business, if you're a client, let us know, and we'll be watching out for it too. So that way we can try and merge those, because a lot of plumbers accidentally created new accounts and the review pools were separate, but there are ways to merge them now. There wasn't for a while. And then the other thing that's affected SEO is Google's algorithm changes were brutal this year. There's a bunch of them, and they send you an update. They don't really tell you what you do. And then everybody in SEO land goes like, oh no, what's happening? Some people win, some people lose, but it's just kind of like things go up and down. But what they're really focusing on, and I want to make sure I'm clear on this, SEO is really, it's search engine optimization. It's making sure that you're ranking well, and it's controlled by Google and Bing. And there's even SEO for YouTube. There's SEO for TikTok, those kinds of things. However, the biggest thing to remember when it comes to all of that is that Google in particular, because they're the lion in this, they are the ones who are protecting their user. If you make sure that you are offering good customer service on the internet through the way that your pages are structured, through your click to call buttons, like through how you capture people and how you keep them on the page, Google tends to reward you. And this year was a big push out of things like backlinks and all the little like tactics that were used that marketers were able to just kind of like juice and be like, ah, yeah, we got all these things. Now Google's giving you better authority. Well, now it's a lot about content. It's a lot about just being useful. So they introduced what's called EAT, and I always have to write it down because I never remember it. But these are the things that Google is looking for. Experience, which your reviews are going to be part of that. Your content is another big portion of it. Expertise, how well your content actually helps people. Authority, how often you're profusing that expertise, and your reviews. And then trust, of course, reviews, right? Google wants to make sure that they can trust you to send them their users. All of it's rented land. So that's sort of a big overview of SEO. I'll probably do another webinar specifically around SEO later on, as the year progresses. But that was an interesting shift this year. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that we have AI. And I'll talk about AI in a minute. Video factors or video rankings rose. So one thing we're starting to look at more is how can we get our clients more video? How can, and this is best if it's locally produced, so we're trying to devise some strategies to give them some good templates, to give them some good direction on like, what can we do here? Because video will keep someone on a page, it'll rank well on YouTube, and then that all helps with the overall lift with SEO. It helps keep your ad prices down, and Google's paying attention to it. But when it all comes down to it, it's the plumbers with personality that won, because you got to remember that if you have a good personality and you have a good brand and you've got good messaging, your company isn't as reliant on technology trends. They're just reliant on humans remembering you and identifying with you and connecting with you. So the people who had really put a ton of time into that, they won, because they ended up having a better brand and better recall when somebody woke up and they needed a plumber. So I'm going to take a drink of water, and then we're going to go over 2024. So just let all that sink in real quick. Now let's talk about what I think is going to matter the most as we go into the next year. And that's something that we're constantly looking at. It's like, okay, well, that was then, but what's coming up? Biggest thing, guys, is because the competition is hot on your heels and because the demand is down, it's more important to have a better conversion rate with your CSRs than ever before. Um, the every call that comes in, every possible at bat needs to be taken, and then it needs to be converted as much as possible. So um, here at the agency, what we've started to do is we used to record like, all right, qualified lead, not qualified lead. And we've gotten a lot more granular with that. So now we're saying qualified lead, and here's the big one, missed call. And we have seen some of our clients miss more calls than we would like. We have also seen calls that could be converted that aren't converted. So this is, for instance, calls from for competition. There are ways to weed these things out, but you're going to get them, especially if you're running ads. No matter what, humans are bad at searching. They just go like plumber, or I want the mammoth plumber, and then they click the first link and it's somebody else. And then you're going to get some of those. And you want to make sure that you have a process for handling objections and trying to get that appointment booked. The other thing to think about with your CSRs is they're going to get a lot more objections on things like the estimate fee. And because of that, they need to be trained on how best to handle that. And if you don't regularly listen to your calls and listen to what's happening with your CSRs, you really should. Every now and then go in, do a spot check, take a look at your missed calls and your calls that didn't convert that you think could have converted, and then you'll be able to get an idea. So this is why call tracking and call recording is super important. I think it's just more important now than it used to be. The other thing is we got to get more aggressive with being attractive. And I think that means you got to get more aggressive with offers. It was in 2023, 21, 22, like you could build the brand by being there and being happy and being interesting. And I think that still plays a big part. But I think you need to be thinking about offers more often, and making sure that you're pushing something out that people can latch on to. You have to remember your primary demographic is largely the middle-aged housewife who is a coupon clipper. And so working in ways that you can get them interested is going to be offers because they're always looking for a good deal. I think you're going to see more platforms become more important because there's going to be a lower cost per lead on those. And that's going to be TikTok due to its increase in user base, and Bing due to the fact that Google has gotten so expensive. So we're now building more campaigns on Bing to run in tandem with Google to see if we can bring the overall cost per lead down for ad budgets. And I think that's going to be a pretty big thing as we go forward, especially with Bing making strides in the AI space. Some people are using Bing more than ever. And so we want to be there to actually be poised to jump in on it. Quality messaging is still going to be pretty big. It'll help you break through the noise. Community engagement, always a thing. You could have a down economy, up economy. Community engagement is one of the best things you can do. Agencies can only play support, but if you aren't active in the community, doing things, trade shows, events, sponsoring things, that needs to be part of your marketing mix. Just digital is the problem with just digital is you're never tangible. And I really want people to be tangible. Like if they see you, if they have things that they can touch and feel, take home with them, all of those things turn you from this ephemeral company on the internet to something that's legit. And then another thing is Facebook group engagements. If you have neighborhoods that you really want to break into, join with your personal profile and look, and there's tools for this where you can listen for certain terms. But join with your personal profile, set up a tool like that, or just occasionally crawl the group and be helpful. Not, and it doesn't just have to be with plumbing services. If somebody's looking for an electrician, give them a referral. Say, hey, I work at this plumbing shop, but this is who we refer to because we trust them. And boom, you're looked at as a trusted person. The Facebook group engagements are things that it's really hard for us to do, but I love it when somebody has put some time and effort on it because it's branding and it's just being helpful in a community. So if you're in a really dense populated zone, focus in on the neighborhoods that actually make a dent for your company and where you think your target market is, and then just start interacting, being a part of the chatter. And if you're too busy, maybe your CSR can do it. Give them access to your Facebook profile if you want to be in there as the owner. Retargeting on more platforms. So retargeting is the method by which somebody interacts with your business and you're following them across the internet for a designated period of time, whether it's Google Display, which is really powerful because it shows up all over the internet on a bunch of pages, or it's YouTube. But guess what? TikTok and Bing can do it too. I'll tell you, one of my favorite things to do is with retargeting is utilizing some tools that get you to show up on TVs, like digital TVs and streaming apps and apps in general. But what ends up happening is when somebody visits your website or somebody visits your landing page, you're just showing up all over. And it's a really cheap way to amplify the effects of your other campaigns. Database reactivation, because you got to fight for calls, you want to make sure your loyalty is high. So that is making sure your existing and old customers have been communicated with, even if they aren't showing demand. This is usually the last thing I talk. Well, not, hold on. Proper pricing. Remember, guys, costs went up for advertising and they go up every year. Costs go up for everything every year, but we've had increased inflation. If you haven't adjusted your pricing in the past 2 years, you absolutely need to look at your pricing again. And there's a coaching group that I recommend. Some of you are in it already. He's got a pricing book. He's got a some resources that I'll point you to. I highly recommend that you go into that and take a look at how things need to be, because marketing is one of those things that you got to pay for. But if your pricing isn't calculated with that in mind at an appropriate level, you will always be trying to pay for it without the money to actually do it. So I look at it as an operational expense. Consistency is a big one. It always is. Just if you go dark, awareness for your company just starts plummeting. Like it decays over time, and then you wonder why things like aren't ringing. We are going to face a pretty big difference, I think, by the end of 2024. I think AI is going to be really big on voice search and voice assistance, as well as just active desktop search, desktop and mobile search. There's going to be a lot more of who's the best plumber in, my area, and then it'll give you a list. And we don't know quite how this is going to shake out, but chances are the AI search algorithms are going to be crawling your websites, which changes probably some of the things that we need to put into the websites. And we don't know how it's going to manifest yet, but we are actively keeping an eye on it. Another thing that I thought was interesting, I was listening to another planning podcast from some colleagues of mine, and they mentioned something that I used to mention when we were doing local advertising all the time: elections. It's going to constrain inventory. It's an election year, and that's going to drive costs up because you're going to have political campaigns spending millions and billions into the market in order to make sure that their candidate wins. But what that does is it means that there's more competition in a big way. So it's like Black Friday for 3 months. So this is going to create an interesting constraint on inventory as we get closer to November. And so I think, for some of you, that's going to be a pretty tough area, because here in Alaska, that's where your budget would go up. It's right in that window. And so it's something to keep in mind as we get into there. So doing everything you can to position yourself well before you hit that window is going to be very interesting. The last thing is, because your leads on demand gen is expensive, the collecting and nurturing of cold leads into hot leads is going to be a new thing. If you're solely relying on demand gen, it's going to be really expensive. But if you can bring somebody and get them familiar with your company in to your messaging workflow before they actually need you, the chances of them skipping Google and calling you is a much higher probability. And that's one of the biggest changes that I think we're going to see, which means tracking, analyzing, goal setting is going to be super important. So before we get into budgeting, are there any questions? Does anybody just drop them in chat, and then we'll give you a couple minutes here while I get some water. Okay. Okay, no questions. I covered everything. I'm perfect. At least none that I see. It's Zach. Hey, Zach.
Buddy. How do you compete against, like the $49 drain clean augers and they just like promote that kind of everywhere? Do you, because it's like they're not leaving with like 49 bucks, right? So,
Mhm. So the the your $49 their $49 offer and your estimate fee is what you're looking at. So what I think that it becomes is making sure that people know about the guarantee that that estimate fee gets applied to the work. I don't know if that's something that they do with the $49 auger. They might. But the it that's an interesting question. I don't have an immediate answer. Um, but you got to remember that the person who's going to compare that way is going to be the price shopper in the first place. Like
yeah.
they're comparing you against somebody else. And if you've done the work of building up your company in front of them and in front of that need, that's going. I love the way that's helped us is you don't want that customer. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
yeah. So um the question is how do you make sure that you get those people who would be a good customer within that pool. A, they might not be. B, it's going to take preloading their path to you. So and that's branding, and that's trying to get leads who don't need you today but that you're poised to collect on later on. And I'll talk a little bit about that in the messaging point. So
Cool. Thanks, bud.
all right, so setting goals. So we are getting much more into understanding what our clients' goals are, because it helps us and it helps you guys. Um, it gives you a path. And I used to be so bad about setting goals because I never wanted to actually fail myself, right? And it took an executive coach one year to say, hey, set them anyway. I'm going to force you to. And what happened is my mindset shifted with it. Because if you set the goal, even if you don't hit your goal, you are way better off because you have the knowledge of how realistic or unrealistic that goal was, as well as you took steps forward. It gives you the path. You're walking the path. If you're here, if this is your goal and you hit here, well, at least you aren't still back here because you never set a goal. It helps you measure where you're going. And so we try and do this internally a lot more now, and we're always finding new places to set goals. But for you guys as company owners, I think it's really important to sit down, do a little bit of work to set your goals moving forward into the next year. And every year, kind of take a look at it. And goals can move. The post can move. That's okay. Remember, it's just to make sure you have forward momentum. And so a lot of this comes down to budget planning of, all right, where are you going to end 2023? 2023 is almost completely in the books. It should be pretty easy for you to say like, all right, this will be my projected revenue for 2023. And then figuring out how much you want to grow in 2024. And you got to account for anomalies and weirdness and things like that. But then it becomes how do you actually fuel that growth? Some of that's going to be internal optimizations and efficiencies, but a lot of part of that just takes planning, and then it takes effort. So it takes some marketing. And so let's try and go through our spreadsheet and do the interactive part. And well, in just a second, let me cover this. So with your marketing budget, typically what we say is, where do you want to go? How much do you want to make? Like within the year. Okay. Like what are you going for? And then pick a percentage of your revenue and you apply that to your marketing, or that becomes your marketing budget. And this allows you to always be refilling that coffer so that way you have a way to get customer acquisition rolling. Because if you don't, all you're relying on is word of mouth, and word of mouth tends to do this. It goes up and then it stalls because you've got an insular network. Eventually, you hit the walls of that network, where marketing starts building you networks in places where you have no contacts. And then you start doing a job for this person, and then their word of mouth grows. A job for this person, their word of mouth grows. And then you grow, and then that will stall. But you're always building new pockets until you have a web. And then you've got dominance, if you want to call it that. So Now, how aggressive you are with the percentage of spend, the percentage of revenue that you apply to your marketing budget is going to determine speed and aggressiveness, right? So here's some benchmarks for you. It varies from company to company. Companies who are brand new often have to be more aggressive, and then they can like start hitting a plateau and tailoring off. We found this with my brother's company. I've seen it many times over the years where it's like, okay, now is the time to be aggressive because we need growth because we're trying to get to here, and you don't have a lot of organic or old customers coming in because your customer base is not that big. So you have to work hard at getting the new ones. And so typically cost per lead, which we'll get to, when you're first starting out, it's higher, and then it starts to lower over time. So go into the worksheet, and I am going to give you a little tour of it. Whoop. And I have it up right here. So when you get into it, it should be from our template gallery. It should be view only. Go file, make a copy, and you'll be able to copy it into your own Google Drive account if you've got a Google Drive account, which if you don't, I love it and you should. So with this, edit only the items in blue. And there's other tabs down at the bottom that we'll get into in a minute here. But mark the year, mark what your annual projected revenue is for 2024. And then you can set a percentage. And I've got those measurements in here. Honestly, 5 to 20% is what most small business associations will tell you. And it does vary from business to business, from market to market, and especially from industry to industry. Some people can get away with 8%. Some people need to be 15. Some people have to go as high as 20 to get to where they want to go. What that's going to do is it's going to determine your annual marketing budget, which is in orange here. And then that'll also determine a rough monthly budget. And then as you go through this, one thing I want you to be aware of is if all you're doing is online marketing, you're missing a big boat with offline. And I'm not talking print, radio, and TV. Those are some of the last things that are radio and TV. Those are some of the last things that I would consider buying. I just put a big chat in a coaching group about this. But then you're also going to want to make sure you are marketing to your repeat business because it builds loyalty. You don't want anyone coming out from under you to take your customers away, right? With a $49 auger offer. So, oh, I need to zoom in, Kira. So Kira, I can see you, so just let me know. There we go. And I'll try and take your notes. So with this is kind of just a company, like this is going to vary from all of you. And the reason why I want you to have a budget for offline is because I want you to have a budget to throw events locally or be a part of events locally. But you're most of your lead flow is going to come from online sources because people are going to Google and people are going to look for you and you want to pull up. And so this is where your online should come from. Now, as you go down, you've got ways to allocate how much per month, because not every month is going to be equal. You're going to have seasonality. Some of you have big weather changes to think about. Some of you don't have big weather changes to think about. But the best way to calculate this is pull your lead flow from the previous year and look at where those percentages match up. So this is actually set up for here right now, where typically August through November, you got to be more aggressive. And then actually January could probably use a boost here, but then it kind of slows down in the summer months a bit because they aren't home. Honestly, Alaskans want to be out and about. So go through your lead flow and calculate your own percentages and then pop them in here. And it'll give you a rough idea of how much you should spend into what time. Along with that, the reason why you do it on lead flow and not on revenue generated is because some of you may have lagging indicators on your revenue. So do it when you get the calls because that's when the market is going to be primed. So if you can pull your call volume for each month and then total it up, figure out where it goes from a percentage point, put them in here, and you should have a pretty good plan for the next year. And then down at the bottom, we've got platforms. And this is kind of more internally for us because we want to kind of go, okay, well, how aggressive do we want to be with lead gen versus brand awareness? And so we've got it separated out here over some other elements. Now, that sets sort of like a path moving forward, but one of the biggest variables on whether or not you're going to be successful is going to be this number. This is going to come into play in just a second, because we have to figure out how much it costs per lead to get anyone into your business. And then you're going to be able to figure out whether or not this budget is big enough at 12%, 8%, or whatever. If you don't know what your current CPL or cost per lead is, that's why you track. So let's go back into this and let's talk about cost per lead. But actually, before I do you guys have any questions? Yeah, Zach, go ahead.
Is this your marketing budget? Is that, and does that include the retainer for everything that
I
you
would,
use?
yeah, I would include the retainer in those.
Okay.
Now there's two ways to look at that. You could say, no, I just want that to be my spend. And here's where it gets interesting is if you put it, oh, okay, Tim, we'll talk about that. That's kind of a interesting question. I'll tackle that one at the end. Kira, can you make a note of Tim's question? Okay. So I kind of depends on how you want to run your business. You got to remember, if you don't have a marketing agency, you're probably going to have a marketing person eventually. And so, put those costs wherever they make sense to you. I think it makes sense to put it in your budget overall, but there's no hard and fast rule on it. Okay.
Hey, Tyler,
Yeah.
just so you know, your screen on some of those little words is pretty blurry for us. We're having some trouble seeing it.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, on the spreadsheet in particular.
Okay. Well, sadly, we'll send everyone the recording and it'll probably be better looking. But I'll try and make it as big as I can. All right. So now like I said, the big question is that budget going to work for how much it costs to get the customers that you're going to need? So Jaden, I'm going to give you a little bit of like there is an average cost per customer for plumbers across the US, and that's sort of a benchmark to start with. Then it becomes measuring month over month, quarter over quarter, and then seeing what that cost per lead comes in at, adjusting your expectations on what your marketing budget will do. And then like what our job is to try and drive that cost per lead down over time through optimizations. So my purchasing budget includes everything from the candy we bought or to the retainer from Mammoth. I found it's better to do that. Yeah, Dalton, that makes a lot of sense to me too. By the way, I can be paid in candy if you want to just send that here. We're okay with that? No, we aren't. I can't pay my staff in candy. So, all right. So there's a lot of things that affect your cost per lead. And the cost per lead, there's a lot of conjecture and I think some wrong assumptions around what a cost per lead should be and comparing apples to apples and things along those lines. So what affects it, and I want to be clear, your cost per lead is your marketing budget divided by how many calls you got, and that ends up being how much it costs to drive your calls. This includes organic, this includes return, this includes everything. Just get your average cost per lead, and then that'll help you determine your marketing. When you start drilling down into per platform, that's something that we do as well to kind of go like, okay, does this make sense per platform on these like cost per leads? Because it's going to vary. But for this particular exercise, it's just trying to plan out your year. So look at how much it costs for all your customers that called you and how much you spent to get them. And they're going, because remember, it's a system. One thing you do here affects your CPL over here. And that's why I want to get the average. So biggest thing is geography. Don't assume that the guy who's looking at $64 a lead that you're going to be as cheap as him if you're sitting in California or Texas, right? This is determined also by competition. Your geography often determines your competition, and population density. I look up on my consults, a lot of times I'm looking up the cost per lead for plumber near me in order to see, well, how competitive is the market? And I have seen plumber near me at $160 per click, and I've seen it at $30 per click. The other day, I did a consult with somebody, and it was one of the cheapest I'd ever seen. And I was like, oh, you're sitting in an awesome spot. So, now you got to remember that that's how much it costs to bid on that. And if that's a surefire way to get some customers, that's how much it costs. Somebody else is bidding that up. Now that's on the high end. You can always go for somewhere in the middle, depends on how aggressive you want to be in your market. So there's a lot of nuance to this stuff, and I'm going over the broad strokes. Longevity plays a role. Companies that have been around for a while tend to have a much cheaper cost per lead because they have a lot of trust. Even and their cost per lead even goes down per platform because they could spend money on being number 4 on Google and people just recognize their name, so they go for it. When you're newer, you don't really have that yet. And so you kind of have to spend more in order to make sure that you get enough. And so longevity, of course, the economy, we've kind of already covered that. Your service catalog will make a difference as well. If all you do are really expensive services, well, then, okay, your cost per lead is probably going to be higher because you got a bid on it. And then you're like because different service offerings are going to have different costs to drive that traffic when you start looking at different platforms. So which services you're actively bidding on and trying to get. If all you do is drain cleaning, man, I've seen that one be all over the map too. Like sometimes it's really high, sometimes really low. It depends on competition too. So your advertising. So if all you're doing is demand gen, your cost per lead is going to be really high. If you have a good steady retargeting as well as brand awareness going into specific markets, your cost per lead tends to go down over time, and that builds that trust that also those longevity players have. Your reputation is a big factor in this as well. If you don't have a lot of reviews, it's harder for you to get the clicks. It's harder for people to trust you when they look you up, and so you end up having to get them through Google search instead. And so you end up having to pay more. Your brand and how strong that is dovetails with your reputation and your messaging. If you do things like offers, sometimes you can get those clicks a little bit cheaper, but you do increase the rate of tire kickers. And so that affects your conversion rate, and that all changes. And then, of course, optimization. With campaigns, there is always like, well, let's put our best foot forward, see what results we get out of it, and then start making adjustments. And this is especially on things like being in Google search. That needs to happen, every 3 days. We're going into things and looking at it and sort of like tweaking some stuff. But it's even optimization around your messaging and your overall marketing mix over time. So cost per lead it's an important number. And these are all the things that go into where that's going to sit for you. And this is why the measuring and tracking is so important. And that's why we listen to the calls, we qualify them, and then we go through it. So I've got some examples of our cost per leads right here. These are both newer companies with smaller spends to give you an idea. And so when we went through, okay, cool. This is where all the calls came from. I blocked out the client names because I didn't have the permission because I threw all this together last night. Not all of this, just this part. I was like, let's show some cost per leads. And these were our ones that I was like, okay, yeah, let's grab these guys. So you can see average call is $750. We got 35 leads for 2,600. That drove, about 26,000 into the company if they actually booked all those in. And these are qualified. Like these are ones where we listened to it and we went, this is a good call. They should be able to close that. And so that makes it $75.70 per lead with an ROI of $10. So every dollar in, $10 out. Will that maintain true in December? No, probably the cost per lead is going to go up a little bit because it's harder to get people to move around Christmas time. And that's some of the time frame that we measure. And so month over month, we're going to be able to take this client and calculate it out for the year. And then next year, we'll start with a really accurate cost per lead. And so you can take a look at the mix here. A lot of it's going to be Google Business Listing, a lot of it's LSA, then Google Ads, which is about the mix that I would expect. Social media often turns into more Google business listing calls. So we don't usually get a lot straight out of social. Missed calls, 10 of them. This is also another reason why I don't put the client name on there. So they missed 10 calls. We look at that as qualified calls because we don't know, and it was on the customer, on the client to be able to actually answer those calls. Now we're like, oh no, 10 calls. What if those converted into more? And then we start going like, all right, should they get an answering service? This is why it's important to take a look at your missed calls month over month. And the website itself drove 3 calls, new website. So then another one, a little bit bigger, a little bit longer business in play, 56 qualified leads, no missed calls, and you can see where they all came from. And $89.26 with an ROI of $11.20. So this allows you to plan. Like we have a much better idea at the budget moving forward with this client and what it's going to take to actually move the needle. And so then we can start building a better spreadsheet that you already have access to. So now let's go into the worksheet and talk about the cost per lead. And so Jaden, this is going to be good for you to see here. So if you go back into it, go into the lead generation target planner thing. By the way, guys, I wish I could say that this whole thing was my idea. It is not like part of a group I'm part of gives us access to some of these resources, and then I make it work for us. This whole slideshow is kind of based off of that. But so it automatically brings in your targets, your revenue and your monthly revenue target in here based off of your previous entry. And that 12% is calculated in here later on as we go. So what is your average ticket value? So I was on a call with a client the other day and they're like $1,200 last month. And I was like, awesome, that's great. Let's see if we can maintain that, right? So this one is high, but some people are sitting at 650. Man, I've been talking to some clients who, not clients, but like consults, who are sitting at 450. That means that to reach 3 million, they're going to need to drive 556 calls. And you need to do the math and figure out, well, how many service techs do you have? And can you actually do that? Then look at your conversion rate. And if you're converting 80%, you're actually going to need to drive 694 calls. And so annually, you need to drive 8,333 calls to your business. Now, the average cost per lead, industry average in 2023 was $115. And I want to caution you something about this. That is industry average. That includes all the people who are bad at it, right? And all the people who are good at it. But you just saw 2 examples of our own clients having a lower cost per lead, which dramatically changes whether or not this is going to work. So if it was $80 cost per lead and your ticket rate was 600, and I just go in here and I start doing fun math. This is why I wanted to make sure you guys had this. You go, okay, well, where do we need to be on our average ticket, which helps you determine your pricing. If like your cost per lead and your pricing and your conversion rate are off, you've got to figure out what you can optimize. And it usually is a combination of all 3. If you're not charging enough, it's not going to work. If your conversion rate is really bad, it's not going to work. And if your cost per lead is really high, it's not going to work. And the tricky part is eventually your cost per lead is going to be as optimized as it can be. It's going to be as low as it feasibly can be in your market. And then these are the only 2 numbers that you can sort of mess around with. And so optimally, it needs to be a group effort of both whoever's doing your marketing or you yourself if you're doing it, and then your CSRs and you as the owner determining how much you need to charge for your services. And then you have the knowledge that, okay, we're in the green, we're going to be able to push our business forward, utilizing the plan that you have put in here. And this also plays a big factor. And I thought about putting this on the other page, and I probably should have too. But this here, because it's going to be a tight year, it might need to be 15. It might need to be 20. It's really going to change for all of you. So what we're doing is we're helping clients work through this whole process and then measuring it over time and revisiting it to try and make sure that we're in line. And this is what kind of determines the first steps of your annual marketing. So, does anybody have any questions on cost per lead and all that stuff? And go back over to here. All righty. Well, I'm going to take a drink of water and you guys can just ruminate on what I said, which is what I tell my children. You think about that. 6 below here, and it's very dry. So I got to stay hydrated.
So, I got a question.
Yeah, go for it.
We're just about to get signed up with Jared on the coaching program ahead of signing up with you to get marketing. How long, like we don't have our website set up for anything. We're just working off of our network right now. It's keeping me relatively busy, but how long do you figure before we can see maybe a couple calls coming in from the marketing, like, 3 to 6 months, or like you figure it could be a little faster sometimes, or?
So what we like, because we've seen sort of how aggressive the market needs people to be. We've changed our middle tier service package, and we're for people who really need it, we're kind of like swapping in and out of service. That service is we're swapping social content for Google Ads.
Right.
And so the Google Ads, typically you start seeing calls relatively quick, but it does take time to dial that in, and it takes about 1 to 2 months before we feel like we're a little bit on step for that particular service.
Yeah.
Still more expensive than like other places, right? So your Google business listing, your website, all of that is really going to be review dependent. And honestly, what I would do right now is if you don't have a Google business listing, go get one. Ask anybody you're working for to go and get reviews onto that listing. There's no sense in waiting for other things to happen before you do that, because it's just going to help push.
Yeah, we're at a 5-star rating right now. I've been trying to get as many as we can. When we plan to get in your top package because we want the full branding, all that kind of stuff as well. But I was just curious, right? Like we're just waiting on our credit card and stuff so that we can actually set it up on a business credit and get you on reoccurring payments essentially.
Yeah. So what I tell people is the first 3 months is onboarding and building a lot of the systems, and you will see traction in there, especially in like 2 and 3. But then the next 3 months are really where we get to work the actual system instead of just having like fingers of it activate. And after that, we have a pretty good idea of cost per leads, and then massaging things moving forward and like working more ahead with straight out. So, but with that in mind, we try and get you quick leads as much as we can, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like for some clients, we launch a landing page before we even build their website because they don't have anything. And the landing page is just one page, but at least it can collect leads. So
we understand that there'll be some foundational work to do. Like if we don't even have a website or anything, there's nowhere to really drive them through, or to typically. So I was just curious.
Yep. Dalton kind of has it right. 2 months for him. And LSA is another good one for more immediate stuff. Problem with LSA is it can be finicky. And so like I love LSA because it's cheaper leads and it tends to be easy to set up and manage, but it can be a little hard for it to actually, like some places have a harder time with volume than others, and sometimes it takes weird settings. Google doesn't have a good manual for it, and they don't really tell us everything. So all right.
Cool.
All right. So messaging. This is like the unseen aspect of your CPL. A lot of people, I think, don't go into their messaging as much as they should. And this is going to be a huge thing for us going into 2024. We are trying to build better messaging, better, more fun messaging, things that really hit the target demographic better in order for our clients to stand out. And a lot of that comes from making sure that you aren't boring, and pushing the envelope in tiny little ways. So to give you an idea, we rolled these out. Some of you have seen these, but these were Facebook ads, and they're just cheesy little things, right? But they're better than just saying, "Hi, I'm a plumber." And the biggest thing for us is going to be pre-building these for the Mammoth Plumber. This is a fake plumbing brand that I created so that way we can make messaging and then roll it out across the client base. But it gives people entertainment just by being there. Because most of the time where advertising shows up when you're building a brand is not on a lead source. It's going to be on a platform that somebody goes to because they are bored and they want to escape for a little bit. So give them that escape and they get value. We pay for entertainment all the time. And like, it's a $1 billion industry. If you give it away for free, people don't immediately think of it as value, but it is. And they're way more apt to call you if you're interesting and if you've entertained them in some way. And this all needs to be filtered within the target demographic and the kind of company you want to be and things like that. I like to be surprising and a little bit weird. You know, you got a turkey there, surprise turkey. And we're talking about Thanksgiving poops, guys. That's what's going into that ad there. But you don't want to go too far. And, you know, some of that's going to be your own personal preference, but always filter it through who's your primary target demographic. The other thing in here, and this is hard for us to do, but we're trying to build out templates and scripts and things to give you ideas on how to use your own crew. Pull out that cell phone, get more photos, get video, like get it on social, put money behind it, turn it into ads, build out your company as a presence, because these messages are fun, but nothing sells like a person and a human who is actually fun to interact with and fun to see. This is the reason why I am the face of all of my marketing, is because just selling Mammoth marketing was not fun enough and it wasn't interesting enough. It's the same thing with Jared with his coaching program. Like once he pushed his face out on things, it really made a difference. Use your crew. If you don't want to be on camera, find somebody who will on your behalf. And meet the audience where they're at. Like they don't want to be sold to when they're scrolling social media. Don't sell. Like for the most part, like there's a time to sell and there's a time to just be there and be fun for them. So again, leverage what the internet expects. So memes and jokes tend to go pretty far. Videos are great, personal touches. These are, again, cheesy, but they're going to stop the scroll better than some of the other creatives that we've all seen. So put entertainment before sales on some of your messaging. And then money talks on social. If you're relying solely on organic traffic, oops, dropped my pen, for social media, it's gonna be a slow go. The biggest thing about social is it's $10 for 1,000 views, and sometimes it's cheaper than that. Like we've seen CPMs down to like $4, $5, and if you target a market like a neighborhood with that, you're gonna hit them enough times for your messages to be sticky. And frequency is a big component of advertising that matters. So what we're looking into, and there's some tools that do this, sadly, it's hard to do it on platforms, but is an auto boost, especially for Meta properties. Meta has actually done really good at retaining users after their couple years of bad press. And some of that is thanks to Twitter turning to X and them getting all the bad press. But the user engagement on Meta properties has stayed pretty high. But so looking at tools that will auto boost, just every time you post, it gets a little boost. Could be $10 a post, could be more. So the other thing on those is keep your advertising and your offers as ads. So this is a change that we're making internally, is rather than post the offers on social for the organic, where people are expecting just like fun things in the feed and it largely goes out to your audience, use the ads, the ad categories and the ad networks in order to actually activate people through direct response messaging. This is where your offers come in. So that's where your sales activities should go, because you're going to want to direct them to a landing page that collects their info and then they become another kind of lead. And this is an example of like a mailer. Again, if you're doing mailers, I highly recommend each one has an offer, because mailers are bad brand builders, good offer builders, good lead magnets. So, but you got to tell the customer, keep this around. You want pieces that are physical to stay in the home. Like consider that as your tiny little salesman that gets sent in the mail, comes through the threshold of the door and gets set down on a counter or on a refrigerator. So give them a reason to put it on the refrigerator. That's going to be an offer that they can take advantage of sometime through the year. So like these offers here, you could put like a 3 to 6 month expiration date on it. And then make sure you have another mailer coming and another. Like one thing about direct mail is it rarely works if you aren't consistent, at least once a quarter. We had a client come to us and he had pre-built out his mailing for new customers. So like a new customer would do a job and then it had a set rhythm for other mailers coming down. And I loved it. I was like, okay, let's just make these mailers better. But I love the we're just going to nurture this customer and keep on going with them. And it works with his CRM because he's inside of Service Titan. So it's really easy to say, aha, this automatically goes. Otherwise, you got to do it manually. So use offers to collect leads and drive action. But remember that you're not really a plumber. You're a partner in home care. Like that's what you want to position yourself as. And if you need an explanation of the target demographic, go get that workbook. And there's one there. Oh, hey, look, thumbs up. Even my computer agrees with what I'm saying. Just remember who you're marketing to. And this image here is a perfect example of that woman who is essentially my wife. I've got twin boys. This is a very real thing that she deals with in the home, out of the home, all the time. She doesn't have time to think about like who to call. But if you give them a reason and then they're going, okay, that's who I'm going to call. That's what you want. So again, about offers and moving people. And I think this is going to be really critical for the next year because it used to be you just went after all the cold people. Like, okay, let's go after cold. But I think now what you're going to need to do is run your ads and offers, building, like generating clicks and engagement. That leads to people to be warm. And those people have shown interest. And what you want to do is make sure those people through retargeting, because it's much smaller on your budget, those people are most likely to turn into hot. And that's where they call you. And that's where they're cheap for the click. So what you're doing is you're priming your audience for the day they wake up and they have the need that you can serve. Because you can't, unless you're running around with a hammer and breaking pipes, which I would love to see somebody do that on the side, like don't make it official. But for the most part, like you've got to wait. You make people aware. You make sure you are hot on their heels to make sure that you're the only one that shows up for them. And then you turn them into the actual customer that's done it hot. So this is classic marketing funnel stuff. And so this is where I think we're going to be building out campaigns that nurture people into a system like this. Because the whole idea is to keep them from Googling plumber near me, keep them from looking and asking for their best friend to refer somebody, but for them already to have pre-picked you by the time they wake up and they have an issue. You're the cheapest keyword on the internet. If all you have to do is bid your own keyword for that click, it's going to be far cheaper than spending on plumber near me, which is important. Like you got to get the cold audience sometimes, but you want to prime people to come to you. So all of this kind of comes down into what's going to matter. So I'm actually not going to go through this worksheet too much because it's something that you guys kind of need to do either with your account manager or on your own, but you can pre-plan your monthly messaging. And this way you can, well, for us primarily, like we can work ahead, like, but so can you. So go into this worksheet as well and take a look at, well, here's our main platforms. What are we going to say? And I will tell you, consistency on platforms matter, because if somebody sees you and you're retargeting to them, you're going to start showing up in multiple places. So you're going to show up on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Google Display, TikTok, and maybe on OTT, which is a whole nother platform deal. But if your offer is consistent, they only have to pay attention to one thing. You want to avoid feeling scatterbrained for the user. Be very consistent with your message, which is why I recommend a monthly like offer, not like 7 of them going out in a month. It's just A, it's really hard for you to track, very hard for marketing to track, but B, it also shows your user that you're always on sale for something, so that it's kind of scattered. So I think consistency matters. And that's why you go, okay, we'll run this offer in here. So to give you guys an idea, when you get into the marketing calendar part, can you see this okay, Kier? Okay, well, we'll see. Maybe it's your internet and everybody else, it's clear.
It's not just me, but we can see it, but the words just look like black blur.
Okay, well, luckily y'all have access to this too. So what I would do is think about your area, think about what jobs you want to try and drive in what months. You're always going to have other things that you want to keep driving, but, and this is largely around your monthly messaging objectives. And over time, you'll learn what gets people to motivate more. So for like January here, it will be about 20 below zero. Burst pipes are a big deal. And so we want to make sure that that is that. And then we've got a offer that is paired with that message. And we're going to run that through social ads, display ads, email, going out to existing customers, and the leads that you have collected from past offers. That's one thing and that's what I mean by nurture, right? You've got if you do offers, you get customer information that you've never had before and that have never used you. And now you get to nurture those people through things like emails and mailers and texts, right? And your budget may not allow you to do everything. Mailers can be expensive. And then define what your offer is, right? All right, $50 burst pipe repair. And remember your disclaimers. Disclaimers are massive. I've been in marketing long enough to see people forget disclaimers and there be mistakes made that are problematic. My first week in working for an agency, the previous production person forgot to put a disclaimer on a like 75% off ad for a brunch in town, and the restaurant felt like they had to honor it. And that cost them a lot of money. So another thing is in here is just some pre-built offers that you can do, as well as some disclaimer languages to keep in mind depending on your offer. So you can use these as sort of just like getting the ball rolling, getting the brain juices going. I will tell you though, when it comes to offers, and I think I actually mentioned it in here, maybe not, but with offers, don't get complex. Years ago, we had a client do a Black Friday offer, and they said like, okay, if you show up between this window, it's this % off. This window, it's this % off. This window, it's this % off. If your offers are confusing, this is another reason why to be simplistic. Don't complicate the messages. If your offers are confusing, the user will not want to engage with them. If you have too many lines of text for people to understand what your offer is, you're making them work to understand what it is you're trying to ask them to do. So avoid that. Keep it simple. One offer. Just make it simple. Otherwise, people will not want to keep track of your criteria. So the KISS method, keep it simple, stupid, or keep it stupid, simple. You can twist that either way. So text offers are something that I think are going to become more important. The one challenge that you're going to find with those is a lot of the carriers are now trying to block spam text calls. So only opt in the people who have got your offers and your existing customers. There's a new regulation around that they're doing, the carriers, around text message authentication. And so for like our clients, we're going to have to start going through that process. And that can be a week to a couple months because it can be very finicky on making sure that our submission for the application is correct. And you can't run text well to bulk until you have that done. All righty. So now the last thing, anything with marketing, time, consistency, that's what's going to give you the most momentum. And that's going to be true of anything in your business. Big things take time. So here is a resource that a lot of you already know about, but if you do not, I highly recommend that you take advantage of this. If you go to wealthyplumber.com, you actually don't even need the playbook. He made this his homepage. This is my brother's coaching course. And he has this whole playbook written out. You can get the playbook for free there. You do turn into a lead for him and you will probably hear from his team. And then you may see me in the coaching group if you sign up for that. But for the most part, the biggest lesson that we learned when we were taking on Jared's business, as well as other clients that we've had over the years, is if you have a business problem, no amount of marketing is going to fix it. And that's why it's important to put those goals in place, look at your numbers, figure out what the cost per lead is, listen to your calls. All those things are important. But if the business is broken in some way, marketing's not going to help that. I've been in that situation before where we have somebody who has, and this is especially true of like local clients here that were not plumbers, where they have, I got this idea, I want to do this thing. And the audience, like people didn't want what they were offering. And they're like, the marketing's broken. I'm like, or they don't like what you got, man. That's okay. You just got to adapt. And then when they finally realize, okay, well, what if I tweak this, this, and this, then things start to work. With Jared, one of the biggest factors was pricing. Once he realized what his pricing needed to be, it changed a lot. And then he had the momentum behind him to start growing. So now this is the salesy McSales pitch part. For those of you who don't know about me or aren't clients, I do free consults. I give everybody at least an hour. They usually actually run about an hour and a half, which Kira always reprimands me for. But and we dive in. We talk about some of these things. We talk about what the cost per lead might look like in your area. We look at what you've got as far as marketing, and we try and analyze what you should be working on. These are free. They do not cost anything to sign up. I do another little salesy McSales pitch at the end of those. And then if it makes sense for us to work together, cool. If not, that's okay too. But if this like loses you, or if you're unsure about some of the stuff, I'd be happy to sit down with you. And so if you go to our website, mammothforplumbers.com, that's where you can just hop on my schedule and schedule one of those. So with that in mind, are there any other questions?
You want me to bring us back to Tim's question now?
Yes, I'm glad you.
Perfect. So Tim's question, he said, my PPC budgets are not being completely used on a week-to-week basis. Is there a way to get more out of it?
So you have to be careful with PPC. There's two things that can happen with PPC. You launch it and doesn't spend, or you launch it and it spends everything and you're not able to get much out of it. And those things vary dramatically. And so with PPC, especially if you're running actual Google ads, not like a smart campaign, where you've got a lot of granular control, the issue can become if you leave off the guardrails, the budget kind of can go awry, right? So you want to try and tighten it in. And we've launched both wide and narrow, and it can vary, right? Because you need the calls. So we don't want to, like, if you launch it and you're like, man, it's just not doing what I want. Well, then you start taking off guardrails and you start gathering a whole bunch of stuff you don't want. And so we've learned that you got to be more careful and really analyze the back end. So, but in your particular case, what you might want to do is go into your keyword settings. You have 3 settings in there. There's broad, match, and phrase. Or there's broad, exact, and phrase match types. Broad opens you up to just about anything. So if you have the word plumber, you're going to show up for anything with plumber, whether or not that's a call that you want. And you typically want keywords and search terms with intent, like local plumber means somebody is looking for a local plumber. So go look at those and see if they're on broad, phrase, or exact. If they're on exact, move them into phrase. If they're on phrase, move them into broad. But watch the campaign carefully, and set a rule on the account maybe, so that way you don't actually overspend. But this is where like early campaigns and early Google ads has a tendency to, it just doesn't perform typically the way you want. And then you got to rein it in or expand it out carefully. And that takes time and effort. When you make a change, give it at least 3 days for it to cook before you go into it again, because every time you make a change, Google has to figure out what your intent is, and they've got to figure out what the audience wants and sort of match those things up. So that's Google search for you.
Thanks, Tyler.
You bet. Zach, are you next on the queue?
Going back to the offers, would you just run like a post for January, for example, for burst pipes, and you just boost that throughout the month? Is that what you're doing? Or how many offers? Do you just do like one offer a month kind of thing? Or?
I would do one offer a month for clarity and for tracking purposes. You'll end up being able to measure one offer way better than like 5 offers. And you're going to have a better market match fit. So, like typically what I would do, like what we want to do here is say, okay, burst pipe, frozen pipe repair. Hey, it's a cold year. You guys are going to have problems. Here's $50 off. And you got to think about your margins and what makes sense. Don't overshoot your offer to the point where you're shooting yourself in the foot, right? But what that's going to do is it will have some people activate to call you who normally wouldn't. But the biggest thing is that even if they don't need it, they are taking advantage of the possibility they will need it, and they will go to the offer page, fill out a form, and now you have their contact information. Then you can upload that into retargeting, and you can make that part of your nurturing. And that's the true game behind the offer.
Am I doing that on like a Facebook lead campaign, or is it just on?
You can't, no, I wouldn't. Because you need them to hit the landing page in order for the retargeting to work across multiple platforms. This is the one problem that I have with I have a couple problems with Facebook lead campaigns. But one of the biggest ones is if you want that contact to hit your greater marketing, the easiest and the most surefire way of doing that is to have them hit the page. And if they hit the page, they get added automatically to your remarketing list, and you're following them around for a while before you ever take that email and upload it for customer match or lookalike audiences in Facebook and Google.
Right. So you're not clicking like call now, you're saying visit website kind of thing?
Yeah. So Facebook has a button called get offer.
Get offer?
Or maybe it depends on the campaign objective that you have inside of your first step of building a campaign in Ads Manager. If you go for leads, I'm pretty sure get offer is available. If you go for awareness, it's not. And so it really varies. But typically, the other thing that has changed on these platforms is there used to be like ways to sort of like game the system, and they've gotten a lot better at it. So pick the objective that actually meets your goal. So that's where that comes in. And so if you want leads, ask for leads, but your conversions need to happen on a page, not inside of the Facebook platform.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Any other questions?
I had one more, sorry. Does Mammoth, do they do text message offers?
So we are working on that, Zach.
You're working on it? Okay.
So yeah.
Okay.
We're fighting with the carriers on getting the A2P regulations sort of figured out. And I've got some consultants that I'm talking to on how to like make sure that we get those numbers approved. But then yes, my hope is that we can. The other problem with it is text messaging does cost money, like, and we were trying to figure out like, okay, how can we, does this work within our package pricing, or do we need to split it off into something else? And it's really going to depend on list size when it comes to that. But it's something that I definitely want to do, because I think that that's going to be another zone where we can nurture people forward.
Oh, okay, cool.
And by the way,
does that work in Canada too, or?
I think so. That's a good question. Cool. Yeah. I think it will. So the back end of our system is built on a CRM called High Level, and it allows us to do the landing pages and forms and emails and text messages. And it has a whole bunch of things like the webinar, all the webinar reminders and all that stuff came out of that system. That's what we run for clients on our end. And then we try and hook it up to your own CRM as much as possible. But there's always a little bit of separation, but we kind of needed one that we knew and we could control and we can like put things in. And then it has some of these capabilities that we roll out into the client base. Another one is live chat one day. So
yeah,
you got to have a CSR ready to actively like be there to reply. So
cool.
All right. Well, I was super thorough, apparently. Next time, I just won't be thorough. I'll put all this together in 30 minutes. So, big holes in the ideas. So again, if you guys want to do a consult, you can find that at Mammoth for Plumbers. Clients, a lot of what I talked about here today is what's going to be talked about by your account managers as we move forward and planning out the year a bit more. And for those of you who don't have a marketing agency or doing things yourself, I highly recommend you look at the wealthyplumber.com playbook stuff, because that can help give you a good foundation of how to run your plumbing business. I, as a marketing agency, can't teach you how to run the business, but I can help you with the marketing. So I like to refer people to somebody who knows more about the business, which happens to be my brother because he runs one. So anyway, well, with that in mind, guys, I want to no raised hands here. Cool. If anybody, I already covered that. That's pretty much it. That's all I got, folks. I hope that was informative. I hope that was useful. And I hope you take it, have a good Christmas, do some analysis, and then you kick 2024 off real strong.